Hello everybody, this is Nick DeTiro, Professor of Information Technologies and Computer Science, Lakeland Community College. Let's talk about Netcat. Netcat is another one of those very small footprint command line tools that is native a lot of times in Kali. I mean, it's readily available there. It was normally written for the Linux, Unix environment, has been ported over to the Windows environment. You'll see it in networking. You'll see it in ethical hacking. All right. So let's get started by, let's go up to my screen and let's take a look at just the general concepts of Netcat, and then I will do some demonstrations using that tool. Alrighty. This variation of Netcat is created by the people at Nmap. They call it general purpose or a Swiss Army knife. Well, they call Nmap a Swiss Army knife. So a lot of these tools have very simple functions, but you can use them in a variety of ways. If I was just to scroll up and read some of this, we could use it for testing. We could use it for establishing connections. You'll need it as a general purpose command line tool for reading, writing, redirecting, encrypting data across ports. We can control what ports it's going to use. Generally speaking, you'll hear me talk about the client server side to it. The server side means that we're running some kind of program and it's waiting for some kind of connection. The client side is obviously the client. They're requesting some kind of communication. And what we could do with Netcat is we can simulate that. We can obviously use it as a tool, but we could also simulate it. So I think the best thing to do is just kind of go up to my test environment. I'll shrink this down. And in my test environment, just as I was coming to it, now my test environment, you'll see it many times. It changes over time. So it's my little homage to Godzilla. If you've seen other videos of mine, he's one of my favorite monsters when I was growing up. So this is a little homage to Godzilla. But it actually reminds me of something. So as I'm going back and forth between the two screens, on my left-hand side, we have Tokyo, beautiful city, huge, massive. I think I'm pretty sure it's the world's largest city by population. I think it has like 36 million people just in it. And then on and this is just a Ubuntu machine. And on my right side in red, I have Godzilla. Now, again, as an homage, I'm always going to treat my Kali machine, which is the Godzilla machine, as attacking Tokyo. So Tokyo will be the victim machine, a lot of this. Now with Netcat, there's not a lot of, victim target type talk, but in other videos, in this video, I'll bring this up. It's easy to remember that we have one side, client, so the server side or the target side or the victim side, and then on the left side we have Godzilla, which is the attacker side. Let's start fairly simple, and let's just open up a Netcat communication port over here in Tokyo. So my Tokyo machine, my Ubuntu machine, is going to be a server, right? I'm going to open up a service on this machine, give it a second, and pay particular attention. I'm logged in as ndtiro. That's my username, and the machine name is Tokyo. That's going to come into play in a bit. And I'm going to keep it real simple here. I'm just going to say Ncat, listen on port 8888. If you remember our well-known ports, the TCP and UDP well-known ports, I'm just going to randomly pick a port here that is going to be fairly easy for me to remember, right? I don't want to pick any of the well-known ports, those first 1024 ports. So I'm going to, the registered ports, I think up to 49,000. So I'm just going to pick 888. It's going to be easy for me to view that. So now what it's doing, this server side, the Tokyo side, now what it is doing is it's just waiting. It's kind of like if I was to open up a web server. The web server is going to be waiting for some kind of communication. Well, netcat-L stands for listen. Listen on port 888 is just listening for some kind of communication. Now, this is fundamental. This is not anything significant. It just says open up port 888 and listen to some kind of communication. So now let's go over to my Godzilla side or my attacking side, and let's go to a command prompt. Terminal. My machines are running a little slow. Okay, there it goes. And just so we understand what's going on, I am, if you look right here, I am logged in as the username Callie on the machine Godzilla. Over here, username Endatiro on the machine Tokyo. Over here on Godzilla, it's Callie at Godzilla. Now, we can do several things, but I want to use these videos not just to look at one particular tool, but maybe look at a variety of tools. And what I want to do is, I don't know. Let's pretend I don't know the IP address, or I know nothing about Tokyo over here. I know they're on the same screen, but I don't know anything about them. So I'm going to bring out our old friend, Nmap. And to save a little time, I'm not going to do a big scan on Nmap. I'm just going to say, I know what network I'm on. So scan for life on 10.0.0. From 1 to 10. So it's a little bit quicker. And sure enough, I found a couple hosts. This is interesting, the 10.0.0.1. That's the PF Sense, or my firewall. This happens to be the Godzilla machine 10.0.0.2. And then we have this mystery machine at 10.0.0.9. Again, let's look at some other tools. And again, let's look at Nmap. And let's do a port examination on 10.0.0.9. Right? Again, I can do them to all of them, but it's a small network, and I don't want to spend the time scanning. So let's do a search on this. All right, so this is now telling me that on the computer of 10.0.0.9, there is an open TCP port 888, right? 8888. So that might be of something of interest to me. It also says it's Sun answer book. I may do some research on what may potentially be running on that. Okay, so we know there's an open port. Now I'm going to do something a little bit interesting at this point. I'm going to expand this window. I'm going to cover up Tokyo for a second because there's going to be a couple things that I want to be running on it. Let my machine refresh. And one of the things I want to do, my machine is running very slow. I'm going to move this over. And I'm going to fire up Wireshark, another tool that we often use. Wireshark is just a packet gathering software. It's a very powerful software, but it's packet gathering. We can look at traffic on the given network and other things. So I'm going to say, where is Wireshark? Oh, I'm just going to type it. How about we save a little time, Nick, instead of looking for it. So I'm going to say Wireshark. And it's going to launch up. It'll launch up the GUI. Now, if I had several network cards on this machine, it would show me the different cards. Since I only have one, the ETH0, I'm going to say gather information from that particular. You notice that nothing's really happening. Occasionally, you might see traffic coming back and forth on this, and that's fine. If I was to open up another terminal, and something of interest, you notice as soon as I opened up that terminal, I apologize that my machine is running so slow. As soon as I opened up that terminal, a whole bunch of network traffic was generated, right? I don't want to see that. I'm doing something specifically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Wireshark. And I'm going to restart the capture. And I'm going to continue without saving all this stuff. All right. So give it a second. So Wireshark is just listening to the traffic on my network. You may see it in other labs. You will definitely see it in other demonstrations that I do. I'm going to go back to my terminal machine. And what I want to do is I just want to make a simple connection over to that, to Tokyo. So I want to do a netcat connection. I'm going to say netcat, and I'm going to give it the IP address of the computer that I found, and I'm going to have to tell it what port, and this is important, to what port to communicate with. So if you remember, I did 8888. I discovered that with Nmap. So 8888. And refuse connection. I wonder if good chance the netcat had issues. So let's go back to Tokyo for a second. Yes, it did. Could have timed out. Not a problem. And I'm going to launch it again. Okay, it's sitting there waiting for communication. I'm going to go back and I'm going to restart this. If my machine would just speed up just a little bit. And I'll go back to as soon as it clears the screen, go back to my terminal emulator. And I'm going to do the netcat again, 10.0.0.9, go to port 888. And this is what I wanted. Before we go any further, I'm going to go back to Wireshark, and I'm going to move my screen over just a little bit so you can see everything. And I'm going to stop the capture. I don't want any more traffic right now. So I'll stop the capture. I want you to notice these first three lines. They're fairly important. You hear me discuss this topic all the time, but I wanted to point it out in a live situation. There is your TCP three-way handshake. So if I look at it, the source, my Kali machine, Godzilla, 10.0.0.2 reached out to the target machine, Tokyo, 10.0.0.9, and it requested a connection on port 888. So that first part of the three-way handshake, it basically sent a sync packet right here. We see that right here. And what happened after that? The server, Tokyo, said, hey, that port is open. I'm okay you listening or communicating with that port. So 10.0.9 responded back, the second part of the handshake, with 10.0.2 and saying, yeah, here's your sync acknowledgement. And there's a bunch of little things going on with sequences and stuff like that. And then finally, if we look right here, the client, Godzilla, established that TCP connection. It sent the acknowledgement. So that three-way handshake. The client requesting or synchronizing, the server acknowledging back with the synchronous, and then the client eventually establishing that connection. You see that I basically use Netcat as a little bit of a demonstration, a network demonstration of all this stuff that's going on. Now I'm going to turn off Wireshark because my machine's running a little slow. I just wanted to show that first three-way handshake. Maybe this will help with my machine not running so slow. I'm going to get there. I'm going to quit without saving. Now, One of the nice things about Wireshark is I can let it run for hours and then just save that data to a file, and I can look at that file at another time. Alrighty. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double up my screen again. I'm going to close this one. Well, it's already closed, just so it's not there. I just want one terminal window open. Okay, so let me clear this screen. I didn't mean to clear the screen. I kind of jumped ahead here. Here is Godzilla and here is Tokyo. You notice that I typed the word clear and it showed up over here on Tokyo. That is because, I apologize if it's a little confusing, that is because Tokyo opened up a service, opened up the Netcat service, listening to port 888, and then Godzilla, which was the client, established that communication by doing netcat 10.0.8888. When I typed clear, all that's going on with this service is it's listening to the traffic going between the two things. It's kind of like a cheap little chat. Nothing really significant is going on here. So if I was to type the quick brown fox and then I hit enter, you'll notice over here on the Tokyo side, it says the quick brown fox. If I was to do the same thing on the Tokyo side and I say hello from Tokyo, you'll notice that it's popping up over here on the Godzilla side. And Godzilla will, hello, whoop. On the Godzilla side, hello from Godzilla. Enter, and away it goes. So we now know that there's communication going through that port 8888 on the Tokyo side. That would be a fairly boring, use of Netcat. They're very proud of its tools and the things you can do. Yes, we can test ports. We can theoretically put a lot of traffic through that port and see about throughput. We can test routers and IDS systems with Netcat. But let's look at, I'm going to break the communication. And over here, I'm going to start working over here back on Godzilla. One of the things I can do is I could use Netcat for a little open source intelligence, a little footprinting, right? Because it is just going out and communicating or establishing a connection with a port. Now, I happen to use 8888, but what if I wanted to establish a connection with a other port? For example, if I wanted to establish a connection with port 80, we know that port 80 is the HTTP port. Maybe there's a way I can gather information, what we call open source intelligence, footprinting. Maybe I can gather information about a real website out there. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say Nmap, and I'm going to do a real website here. I'm going to say you know what? I'm going to say what ports are open, -st, on site www.zonetransfer.me. Give it a second. It's going to take a little bit because now I'm actually going out to the real internet. There is a website out there called zonetransfer.me in which we can test DNS enumeration and DNS footprinting and things like that. So I've decided to use that. It's an established server, so I'm not hacking anybody or doing anything illegal. I'm basically finding out the information about a server that is out there. So let's give it a little bit of time. Okay, so let's see what the Nmap had to say with the zone transfer here. You know what? I'm going to make my screen just a little bit bigger. we'll come back to Tokyo. All right. I'll make my screen just a little bit bigger, so we can see the entire line. There's always jeopardy of me slowing things down a little bit when I do stuff like that. And I'm going to make this screen just a hair bigger, so it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so www.zonetransfer.me has port 80 open and port 443. Of course it has those ports open. Those are the HTTP and HTTPS, or the web server ports that we are open. But I want to use Netcat to do a little bit of fingerprinting, open source investigation. Can I find out information about the zonetransfer.me? Well, I noticed that gave me back an IP address. I'm going to use the IP address here. So I'm going to say Ncat. And this time we're going to say 103.224.212.213. That's just this particular IP address right here. And I have to tell it, just like I did it with Tokyo, I have to tell it what port to establish a communication to. Since I'm curious about the HTTP, I'm going to do port 80. I know that's not a secure port, so I'm going to say 80. So all I'm doing is I'm telling Netcat to establish a connection with the 103.224.212.213 on port 80. Now, there's a connection there, right? It's not a big deal. This is just a small tool. Kind of just sat there and requested out. That's kind of interesting. I'm going to try it again in a second. It's just like if I was on a web browser and I type www, zonetransfer.me or the IP address, but here I'm using Netcat. So I'm going to try something. I'm going to type a HTTP command. My keyboard has been... We'll get this. Try this again. HTTP/1.0. I apologize. 0. All right, so what I'm going to be doing here is my computer established a connection with the port 80 on that zone transfer, and now I'm just going to send it a very simple HTTP command saying, get the header. And give it a second, and it came back with some stuff, all right? Not the stuff I'm looking for, so I'm going to reestablish that connection. It could have timed out. Could have been me wasting too much time. So let me try it again. Remember, servers don't want to just sit there and talk with people, so I'm having some kind of connection issue. Didn't send a complete request in time. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, let's try it again. So I think what's happening here, unfortunately, is there's some kind of timeout issue that this zone transfer doesn't want to communicate with me. So I'm going to try another server. Why not try another server? Since it's Nmap, I'm going to say netcat. And this time I'm not going to go after the IP address. I'm just going to say www.nmap.org. And I'm going to communicate on port 80. It's not an exact science. These are real live machines going on here. And I'm going to do my head space /base HTTP /1.0. And let's see what this brings us. Okay, this brought up a little bit more information, what I was kind of expecting from zone transfer. It basically, I kind of determined the operating system of nmap.org. Apparently they are not operating system. Apparently they are running CentOS, okay, and they're running the Apache 2.4.6 server. So I basically used Ncat for a little investigation, a little bit of footprinting. There's more I can do with this, but obviously don't want to spend too much time just kind of gathering this particular information. So let's go back and talk to our friend Tokyo and Godzilla. Clear Godzilla. And let's go to Tokyo. Now, with any of these tools, they could be used for good or they could be used for bad. I've said this for years. I can take a butter knife. It does a wonderful job spreading butter, spreading peanut butter. It's a great kitchen tool. Could I sharpen that butter knife and potentially hurt something? Absolutely. So as we investigate these tools, understand these tools are multi-purpose and they can be used for negative impact. What I'm going to do here is going to suspend reality just a little bit. I'm going to open up what they call a reverse shell, or maybe I'll call it a back door. Now let's use a collective imagination here. I write some code. I write a malware, a virus or something, and then somehow I deliver it to a unsuspecting individual. They launch it without realizing that it opens up a connection. So again, suspending a little bit of reality here. I'm not going to be sending viruses. I'm not going to be sending code. I'm going to go back over here to Tokyo, clear my screen, and I'm going to use Ncat. And this time I'm going to say listen on port 80. And so listen, no, not port 80. I don't want port 80. I want port 8888, right? So listen on port 888. But this time, while you are listening, here's where we kind of will introduce a reverse shell or a backdoor or some kind of, or execute a shell, a bash shell, right? So what this is going to do, again, we use this imagination here that I sent this code, somehow I sent this code to Tokyo, to my Tokyo computer. And somebody unsuspectingly launched this code, right? Not realizing it. So again, you'll notice over here in the Tokyo server, I got Entitiro, me, and the server name is Tokyo. And it's sitting there and waiting. Now I'm going to go back to Godzilla. And with Godzilla, I do my Nmap. I discover a very interesting port, 8888. There's something there. Maybe I can establish a communication with that. I'm not going to go back and forth with the Nmap and stuff like that. But this time I'm going to go over here on Godzilla, and I'm going to say Ncat. And I'm going to, just like I've done before, I'm going to say 10.0.0.9 on port 8888, right? So establish that connection on port 8888. And now I'm sitting here. But in my ethical hacking or in my hacking mind, I am not sitting here. I knew I sent out a reverse shell. I sent out that bash. I sent out that code. Somebody opened it on Tokyo, and now that code is running. So in reality, over here on Godzilla, if I start typing things, I'm actually using the Tokyo shell. So if I was to say, who am I? You'll notice the who am I is giving the name of me over here. So I'm over here on Godzilla. I'm executing commands. Who am I? It is showing me Endatero over here. There is a back door. There is a reverse shell. There is some kind of utility that I'm now using to establish that connection. So anything I do while I'm in Netcat, if I do an ls, it's actually doing this command. It's a remote command over here on this machine over here. You can see how this can get very, very dangerous. Again, we suspend reality a little bit. It's very easy for me to sit at a given machine and do, type this command. So we have to use that collective imagination that somehow I created a piece of malware that I delivered to a unsuspecting victim. And that unsuspecting victim launched that malware, and now they have an open port. So how do we resolve it? One, we keep instructing our users not to open up any kind of links, any kind of executables from their emails. Also, I'm going to break out of this. All right. And you can see it broke out of here. I'm going to launch it again over here just so if I go back to Godzilla and I do an Nmap and I do it ST, and this time I know just to save time, as I'm doing my Nmaps, as I'm examining things, I begin to start looking for unusual port activity. Right? So I see a port 8888. It's a TCP port. It's currently open. Why does that machine have that port open? Right? So on our defensive side, we're constantly scanning machines to make a defensive side, the white hat hacker, we're constantly scanning those machines to make sure that those machines don't have ports that don't need to be open. All right. Just a quick little video about Ncat. It's just another network utility. I hope you enjoyed it. Little cultural appropriations. I love Tokyo. Been there a couple times. Love Japan. Love Godzilla. So I think it's a good homage to those two. So a lot of little things with Ncat. A lot of videos up there. If you're interested, you can download it onto your machines. You can play around with it and see some of the utilities. You can send emails with it. You can open up email servers. You can open up a pseudo web server with it. So nice little powerful little tool. With that being said, let's go and learn something.